Hey guys, Comet here. Welcome to episode 18 of my Factorio Odyssey series. Now first off, you may notice there's been a lot of work between episodes, so I've put in a stronger outer wall. Instead of being 3 walls thick, it's now 17 walls thick. I have also removed the old base that used to be in this area here, to make room for all of the railing that I need to put in. And, speaking of railing, there's a lot more grids in place now. So I've been doing a lot of thinking on how I want to organize all of these blocks. And I think the best way I've come up with so far, rather than having little inlets like these for the trains within the block where the stuff is going to be built, I want to make like a checkerboard pattern where if this is the block where stuff is being built, I want to unload here, 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 and here, and then have them all point in. And then I can use this spot here of this grid to supply anything that's going to be built in here. So there'll be like a checkerboard pattern of where the trains unload. It goes off into the 4 directions, and then on the adjacent tiles, or the adjacent squares of the grid, that will be where the stuff is built. And that way I have more room in each square for all of the building, rather than having to take up a lot of space with the trains. And there's also some changes I want to make to the circuitry logic on the requester stations, because there's a better way of doing this, I've found. But all of that is still to come. So I want to get my Spidertron over here and start building some railing. I want to make a module factory, because the modules that are being made back in the base over here, they're just way too slow. I want a build specifically for modules and modules only. And I will be importing all of the raw materials, so that'll be iron ore, copper ore, crude oil, coal ore, and I'm going to need to make some water trains over in this square. And then all of the processing will be done within this square here. And I have been doing a lot of bot builds, so like the mall here and the military mall, they're bot based. But for the module build here, and for a lot of the builds that are going to be coming up, I want to use belts more frequently. Bots are good for a bunch of little things, like in malls, because trying to belt all of this would be a nightmare. But when it comes to modules, they're pretty simple. They only take green circuits, red circuits, and blue circuits. And so that's really easy to bus in. But when you're dealing with anything more than 4 item types, like in a mall, trying to get all of the different belts in is kind of tricky. So bots are just easier. So the way I want to do this, if I pull off trains down this way from the main grid, I want them to turn this way as soon as possible. So like in the depot over here, where I have the 4 quadrants, each supply square will have to have 4 quadrants. So this upper quadrant will be all of the trains bringing in resources to this upper square, and then the left quadrant of this supply square will put items into this square here. So this part here that I'm working on will be what supplies part of the modules. Now ideally, there would be no need for stackers, but as the base expands and my resource patches start depleting and my trains need to go out further and further to pick up resources, the latency between the train loading and unloading is going to increase, and so I'm going to need a larger buffer on the request. But if the trains don't have anywhere to park, then they're just going to back up in this spot here and block all of the other trains trying to come in. So in permanent builds like this, I'm going to need a little bit of train storage before going to the unloaders. So this here, in this little section, will be a stacker. And I think I'll store just 8 trains. That should be plenty. And I do have to keep rotation in mind. So I can only make this as big as this rotation will allow. So it looks to be right about here. So this could be the beginning of the unloaders. And so this is going to look pretty similar to a depot. There's just going to be more space between these trains over here. Now I want to try and fit 4 unloaders at least in this area here. We'll see if I have to do some reconfiguring in order to make that happen. Okay, let me get a train over to here to make sure they fit. So this is 25 DCM 25. Let's have you go to 25 DCM 25. And it looks like they fit perfectly. Now the closest spot where I could put a station is here. And I think unloading to the left will give me the most space. Because then I can use this space here rather than having to use the space on the right. That way the station that's closest to all of these tracks over here can be right up against them. So I'll take some inserters and some belt. And I need some of these. Maybe one of those. So unloading can start here. Need some power. Some lights, of course. And then I need to leave some space for chests. And I think traditionally, I would just put a 6-to-1 balancer here. That way I could unload each wagon as quickly as possible. But when you think about it from a throughput perspective, it's actually unnecessary if you have multiple unloading stations. It's better to have multiple stations that unload not quite as quickly than to have fewer stations that unload more quickly, and that's going to sound crazy, but it cuts down on train traffic, which is a really big factor in megabases. So what you can do instead, or what I'm going to do instead, is something more like this, where each wagon will unload into one belt, and when I tile this, we get an easy 8 lanes out from each train. So then if I copy this part, I can stack these. I want to leave some space for the circuit logic right up in here. So maybe right here. And then if I stack this, put one there, and one there. And then this over here could actually be the maintenance station. Perfect. We'll call this maintenance module south. Because it's the southern depot for the maintenance, or it's the southern depot for the module block, but it's the maintenance station. Okay, yeah. So this gives me 64 lanes to work with of any item. I don't actually think I'll ever need 64 lanes. Because again, I have to remember, I'm only using a 16-way balancer here. I could maybe do a little bit of compression. Can put an 8-to-4 right here. So now that's 4 lanes of 4 lanes. Or 4 of 4, that's 16. So then they'll all run up this way into this block where they are balanced. So let me get this balancer in place, right in the middle of all of the unloaders here, which looks to be right about here. The more I look at this, the more I think I don't actually need the extra inserters here. Because if I'm going to be compressing the 8 belts down to 4, then every inserter will actually be running half as frequently. So that means I'd only need half as many inserters. Or I could just do 2 item types per depot. So this could be iron ore, copper ore. And then rather than compressing them down, I could just have the full 16 on both. That's a possibility. So when I look at how many different item types can actually be brought in by train, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I have 4 input points to each square. So if I do iron, copper, stone, coal, crude oil, and water, that's all 6. I don't know if each build can fit that specific ratio, or if it's better to leave it more flexible. This is a hard one. I really don't know the answer to this one. Okay, I think rather than compressing down to 4 lanes, I'm going to keep the full 8 lanes, but only use as many stations as necessary for what I'm going to be building inside of the grid. So they'll be here just as placeholders in case I do have a build that needs, I don't know, 64 lanes of some resource type. So my idea here then is I'll have 2 trains by default. That'll give me the 16 lanes, and then if for some reason I need more than 2 trains, I can start using these stations over here. But I want to keep it as iron, copper, stone, and coal, and then crude oil and water can come in over here. So this will be iron ore minus. And now I need to do some circuit logic. So since this is a requesting station, I want to use red wiring. The wire type doesn't really matter. It just helps my color scheme here, because all of my requests are generated on the red wire. So the very first thing that needs to happen, the contents of all the chests need to be read into a decider combinator. So if anything here is less than 0, we want to output that back out with the count. So this just filters out any positive values. Then the request can be set here with this combinator, and that goes back into the power pole. So let's say at this station, I want negative 64,000 iron ore in all these buffers. Okay, well, that's pretty simple. But before, on the old system, this would request 4 trains at a time. Well, that's no good. So by doing it this way now, it will always be limited to just 1 train. And since I have multiple stations, really it's 4 trains. Well, if I need 4 trains, I could do 4. But it's really only 2 trains at a time. And there'll always be some in the buffer here. That's the point of the stacker, because I can increase that limit later as trains take longer to get here, if I start pulling from patches that are way out here. Okay, but after it goes through the combinator and filters out all of the positive values, I'm going to send that into here, where this will take each and divide it by the capacity of the train, which in this case is 16,000. It's going to output each. So right now, you can see the output on this combinator is -4. So it's trying to request 4 trains. Now we need 2 decider combinators here that will take that value and compare it against this value here. And this will be the hard limit of this station. And since I have... well, I'll be having 2 active stations, so each station here could reserve half of the stacker over here. So I could theoretically have 4 trains pathing to here, and 4 trains pathing to here, because this is a stacker of 8. But if I had all 4 stations running here, then each station could only reserve 2 spots in the stacker. So we'll do a limit of 4. So the condition here will be if iron ore is less than L, I'm going to output iron ore. And actually this needs to divide by -16,000. That way the request comes out as a positive number. Now if iron ore here, the request is ever greater than or equal to the hard limit, we're going to output the hard limit instead. And then these will go into this combinator and this combinator. This one can send its data to the train, and this one will send it onto the main network, where I can later use this signal in a dashboard. So this combinator here will take each, multiply it by 1, and output as L. So that just ensures that this station always receives L as its signal, because sometimes it will receive iron ore. And then this one will take each, multiply by 1, and output iron ore. Well, actually, it needs to be -1. So now we can see there is a request of -3. And we should see a bunch of trains trying to come over here, but they'll wait in the stacker. And then once this one's done, the next train will come over, trying to fill up this buffer. So I can do the exact same thing over here. And if this station has a limit of 4, and this station has a limit of 4, it will never exceed the stacker here. So now I need to copy, or I guess I could even just blueprint, this entire thing here. We'll call these the unloading stations. And I will put that inside of this book here. And I'm going to get rid of this. And now I can go stamp a bunch of these down for all of the inputs. And I'm going to have to redesign this for the liquid inputs, but that's okay. Now I just have to make sure I remember to switch these to copper. So this is starting to generate a request of copper. And once I change the name on these stations, we'll have some copper trains coming in. But I don't want to fill up the buffers yet. I really should have waited for the iron, because now if I want to relocate everything, I have to take apart the buffer, which is going to be a pain. And then I will make a separate blueprint for the circuit logic here. So the unloading station doesn't have any of the combinators in it. That way no trains accidentally immediately pass to the station. And then I will go ahead and remove some of the variables that are in these combinators so that they can be replaced with whatever it is the station will be requesting. So just make sure that in this combinator, closest to the chests, that's where the request goes as a negative number. And then this combinator here is where the train limit is set. So if you have a bigger stacker, then you can increase the limit on this combinator. So for the requests on the northern station, I don't need any stone to make modules, so this will just be coal. Negative 64,000. And this will also have a train limit of 4. Now I just need to switch all of the blank spots here to coal. And I'll wait to change the station's name once I get to the build setup. So now I have to do the hard one, which is going to be liquids. Or it's going to be more difficult than solids, at least. Because solids are pretty easy to balance. Liquids, on the other hand, require a little more finesse. So I will start with this station. But I'm going to have to change this part up here. So I don't need any of this. Okay, so to unload liquid trains, I need some pumps. And if I do something like this, this should get the trains unloaded. Now the problem is that this tank here, well, because it's going to be pulling from this side, the tanks closer to this side over here will drain more quickly. So it's very difficult to evenly unload a fluid train unless you have pumps constantly rebalancing all of the tanks. But for the purposes of just modules in this square here, I'm pretty sure it'll work. So the logic is actually extremely similar. The only real difference is the number of trains I want to be requesting. I only want a max of 2 ever trying to path here. So this one can request... Well, I don't have either of these set up yet. But I can do water here. And one train can hold 200,000. So I want... let's say 400,000. And then we will sample the buffer here. And I think actually if I connect these, then it might have an easier time of balancing. And this, because it's a fluid train, needs to be changed to 200,000 as well. So with the crude oil and water station connected up, you can see we're requesting water and crude oil now. So I will blueprint this and make a water version of the other blueprint. So we have the solid unloading station and then the liquid unloading station. So I think I might have to save developing the build that's going to go in here for the next episode. So what I can get done in the last couple minutes of this episode, I want to connect up the crude oil to a train. I want to connect up some water to some trains, and then I need to get some liquid trains going in the depot here. That way I can take my time when designing this module build here in the next episode. So now I need to turn the solid provider station into a liquid provider station. So it's going to be pretty much exactly what I set up at the unloading station, just with the pumps facing in the opposite directions. So now I can plug in anywhere on this pipe here to this, and as long as the tanks closest to these pumps are full, the station can say that it is providing. It doesn't really matter if these tanks over here on the right aren't full. What's important is the tanks right here next to the pump. So the contents of the tanks will be read into this combinator here, where it will take each and divide it by the capacity of a train. and output that back out as the number of fluid wagons that can come here. This might actually be easier if I just copy the logic from here. And repurpose it. Okay, so this will go into here. This is the hard limit here, which is the size of the stacker. And instead of outputting cargo wagons, let's output fluid wagons. And then this will be run back into the station. Make sure this is dividing by 200,000. That's the capacity of the fluid train. And then one more combinator here that will plug into the main line. Now I need to get some crude oil connected up with these pump jacks. And then I can start simplifying some of the piping with undergrounds. Okay, so that's starting to fill up these tanks over here. So far there is 41,000, but that's not enough to generate a train load. So we're not seeing anything on the providing wire here yet. So the very last thing I want to do, I need to get a water train for this build as well. So I want to go over here and make a water pickup station. And it's also going to look a lot like the depot here, with 4 different quadrants for pickup. Okay, so over here, I need this. I need some landfill. And I need to be really careful with where I put the landfill, because I can't undo it. So I'm going to copy the beginnings of this here. It looks like I'm safe to landfill this area. Now, I only want to landfill the part where the rail sits and the part where the train station's going to be. So I want to leave as much water as I can to mitigate errors. So this first station here will be the maintenance station as always. Then I can use this train to try and figure out some spacing here. So if I want the loading to be very similar to this, then I can actually copy this, and instead of having pumps here, they will be offshore pumps. So that's another 2 blocks. So if I look at how that fits here, I need to move this over to here. So I need to add 2 more blocks of landfill. I'm going to Control X to cut. And it's going to go right here instead. And to double check I have the spacing right on the pump, so it looks like it sits one block in and one block out. And I do have one extra block of landfill next to the right side of the tank in this blueprint. So it doesn't look like this is actually going to work. I need to move this over one more. And in rail terms, that's 2 blocks. Okay, right here. And now I can fit the pumps. And it looks like we are good. Now I can actually fill up one tile here. But I want to get all of these placed down before I go filling everything up with landfill. And that actually looks pretty freaking good to me. So I think I now have the thing I can tile. I will blueprint this. That way I can copy the landfill with it. And the next one is going to go right here. Look at that. So I want to see how many of these I can actually fit here. So it looks like I can fit close to 12, but I think I'll just do 8 for now. I shouldn't need more water than this. And then once I finish off this quadrant, if I do need more water, I can just stack 3 more of these within this grid here. So one of the last things I need to do before getting some trains going, I need to set up the logic circuitry. So this is going to be one of the more unique stations. There's an arithmetic combinator and a decider combinator. The decider combinator will take the input of water. If it is ever greater than 200,000, we're going to output L. Because only one train can ever path to this particular station at a time. And this will be called water plus. And then the arithmetic combinator is just going to output that data onto the main line here. So we're going to take the value of water and divide it by 1 train load. So we can see there are 3 train loads available, and 1 train is allowed to path to this station. So I'm going to stack a bunch of these, and if each station is providing 3, and there's 8 of them, we should see 24 on the green line. Perfect. And then the very, very last thing I need to do is get some trains onto the liquid schedules. So this train will go to Depot 4. It'll use these over here. So it'll wait for 3 seconds of inactivity, and then it will go pick up some water until full, and then it's going to go to... Oh, I guess I don't have a water minus station yet. This station here is water minus. Now this has a place to go. Water minus until empty. So I will send that on its way, but making sure I copy the color and schedule. And then this one is actually going to be black, because it's going to move crude oil. So crude oil plus until full. And then crude oil minus until empty. So if we look, some trains are already starting to deliver some water. And if you look here, this is at 6.4 6.4, but over here it's at 6.2. So it's slightly uneven because the water drained from this side first. But as long as it has enough time to just sit here between loads, it will eventually balance itself. So again, for really high throughput situations, this might not work. Oh, and here comes the crude oil train. So that is everything I wanted to get done in this episode. I'll hold off on building the module factory till next episode. I got all of the loading stations in place, and I have added them to the blueprint book now. So if you are interested in these blueprints here, there is a link to my Discord in the description. Just make sure you click on the little thumbs up when you enter the welcome page. That way you get access to the Factorio text channel where these blueprints should be hiding. I also put in all of these water pickup stations. That way I can process crude oil wherever I need to. I don't need to look for patches of crude oil next to water and combine them. I can pick up crude oil from here, pick up water from here, and do it in any square that is most convenient. I'm actually really happy with this design, how everything can fit together by having the loading stations in adjacent squares to where they're actually supplying, because then each quadrant of the supplying square can be used for the adjacent square. And then I'll end up with some checkerboard pattern of supplying stations and building squares. If you'd like to see more content like this, consider subscribing, and if you did enjoy the video, let everyone know by hitting that like button. But anyway, thanks for watching, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next episode.